Hello. 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 Am I audible?
Sudhir, you are audible. Can you please repeat it?
Yeah. What I'm saying is actually the actual size of a Ubuntu operating system was 2 GB, but when we installed the Docker image of Ubuntu, we got only 70 MB, 80 MB, right? So why that is very less compared to the actual image?
Sorry, Sudhir. I think it's problem from my end. The output is not proper from my end. I'm not able to hear your voice properly. Can you please ping that in the chat? Yeah.
Okay, I'll ping. Yeah.
Okay. I will read it and I will tell you.
Yeah.
So it is not good from my side. Okay. Yeah. Please type it in the chat. Meanwhile, what we are discussing, we know how to run the container by this time. For that, we need to pull the image first. Even though you didn't pull the image, still we can run the run command. With that, Docker will search for the image in the local machine. That means in the Docker host machine. If that image is not found, then it will try to pull it from the Docker hub, which is a default public container registry. What is it? Docker hub is a default public container registry. We have also seen how to run the container in detached mode. For that, we have used -d option. We have seen how to run the Ubuntu container and interact with its terminal. We have seen how to remove a container which is running as well as stopped. We have seen how to remove a Docker image from the host machine. All these things we learned. Today, we will be continuing the discussion on the same topic, Docker run. Actually, this is Docker container run, but it is fine to give Docker run. We need to provide the image for sure. Okay, because from the image only we will run the container. We don't need to pull the image. We can directly run the Docker run command. Now somebody Spring, yeah, Sudhir is saying the actual size of Ubuntu OS is around 2 GB, but when we install the Ubuntu image, it is just 70 MB. Why the image is very less compared to actual OS? So in this case, Sudhir, as I said, the containers will be using the underlying operating system kernel. Got it? But in case of Ubuntu operating system, it's a full-fledged operating system with the kernel. But in case of containers, containers will be using the underlying operating system kernel, that is host kernel. Got it, Sudhir? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So now we are running the Docker run command and we need to provide the image. And images are versionized. If you go to Docker Hub, this is generally called as what repository. In this Nginx repository, images with different versions will be there. Now, the latest image will be having the tag latest. Okay. So this will constitute the image now. This is the repository and this entire thing is the image. Okay. Or this is the image. This image which is having the tag latest, the image name is nginx:latest, and this image will be stored in the nginx repository. That is how it will be, and this is the tag of the image. Okay, for few days let's neglect this tag. Even though we are not giving any tag here, by default it will be treated as latest. We know how to run the container. Now I want to run the container in detached mode. Okay, I want to run the container in detached mode. That means the container will be running in the background. If it is running in the background, if you want to see the logs, how to see the logs? See, the container is running. Docker logs. Docker logs. What is the container name? Jealous Banjai. This is some random name has been allocated. This is the container ID. So Docker logs. See, we see the logs with the Docker logs command. Docker logs in the container name or the container ID can be given. Now, if you see the Docker image will be present, Docker images. Now I want to run another container from the same image. We can run as many containers as we want from the same image. Now the image that we have used in Nginx latest, now I want to run another container that too in the detached mode. Now if I see docker ps command, see the containers are uniquely named. See here, these are the names of the containers which are randomly generated, and these are the random container IDs. They are uniquely named. So that means you can't create two containers with the same name. Every container should be uniquely named. That is one important point. And another one is, can we name the container? Here some random name has been given. Can we name the container on our own? Yes, I want to run another Nginx container. I want to name this container now. For that we have name option, hyphen hyphen name. What is the name of the container we want to give? This can be any name you can give. It can be your name also. Now let's name this as my Nginx. My Nginx. See, Docker PS. If you see the container name is now my Nginx. That is how we can give the custom name to the container. The port of the container is A0. We will understand this later. Now, how to interact with the container? Docker exec it, the container name or the container ID, then bash. Not hyphen hyphen. Hyphen hyphen we will be using in the Kubernetes. Here just it is bash. Why we are giving bash? What if we give another thing here? That thing we will learn going forward. Now we are into the container terminal, right? Now, if you see where will be the working directory of the Nginx, Nginx will be having home page, right? Where it will be there? It will be there. User share Nginx HTML. This is the location where index.html file will be there. If I cat it, this is the page. This is the home page of the, this is the default page of the Nginx which we can access. Now, Nginx will be used for the front-end application. How to access this? How to access this? Now, we are going out of the terminal. For that, what we need to press? Control PQ simultaneously. Now, Docker PS. Now, let me inspect the command container. Docker inspect. What is the container name? My Nginx. Again, I'm telling you can use either the name of the container or the container ID also you can use. Docker inspect. Now, let's see what will happen. If you see Docker inspect, we will be getting the properties of that container, the ports, the volumes, the other things. Okay, so the default things which are used to make this image. Now, if you see in the networks part, it is connected to bridge network. What is bridge network? We will learn going forward. See, what is the IP address of this container? The IP address of this container is 172.17.0.4. This is the internal private IP address of the container called my Nginx. Now let's copy this IP address in our notepad. This is the IP address of my Nginx container. Every container will be given or assigned with an unique IP address which is private and which is internally accessible. We can't use this IP address to access this application outside of the Docker host machine. I can't access it here. Okay, because that is internal to Docker host. Now what I will do is I will try to create a container, Ubuntu container I will create. Docker run my Ubuntu image name has to be given. In order to interact with it, we need to use -it. Now let's do it. So here something is missed. What is missed? Name is missed. Now let's try to access the Nginx application with the IP address curl. Curl. What is the IP address of the Nginx? This is. And what is the port? We saw that it is port 80. Now if we curl it, what it is saying? Curl command not found in the Ubuntu container. apt update. I am installing the curl. apt update. Now curl it. See, we are able to access the Nginx application. Where we are accessing it from? We are accessing it from the host machine. This IP address can be accessible within the host. Either it can be in the host or it can be in the containers which are running in that host. What does it mean? Sorry, this is not host, this is container. We are able to access the application from another container in the same host. This is our Docker host machine. This is our Nginx container where Nginx application is running. This is Nginx application. Now we have created another container called my Ubuntu and we are able to access the Nginx application from the my Ubuntu container with its private IP address. Now, Chandresh is asking 3 Nginx application running on the same ports. Yeah, every container, every for Nginx application, the port is 80, but we will map with the different port. Okay, that we will see in the port mapping. Okay, we can't Docker host. We can access the application with the Docker host IP address with unique ports. We can't use the same port for all the containers. Okay, we will see that. Now, because here every container is having its own IP address. If you see, now let me come out of this, Control PQ, Docker PS. See, even though the port, these are the ports of the application which are running in the container. Now, every container will be having its own IP address. Docker inspect. Now let's inspect it. If you see, its IP address will be different. This is 172.17.0.3. Earlier it is 0.4, it is 0.3. Okay, every container will be having its unique IP address. And we will see, we will assign the different port of the host, unique ports to the container, and we will be able to access it. That we will see in a moment. Now, how we have done? We have accessed the Nginx application from a different container which is running in the same host machine. Now let's try to access from the host. Curl 80. If it is 80, we don't need to specifically mention about it. Okay, by default, we are not giving the HTTP port is by default, it is 80. See, the Nginx application is also accessible from the host also. Okay, because that IP is internal to the host. That means that IP address can be accessible from the host and from the containers which are running on that particular host. That is one thing. Now, but how to access it from outside of the host machine? For example, this is our Docker host. I want to access from my Windows machine. How to access that? For that, we have a concept called port mapping. What is port mapping? Let's see now. This is Nginx container, and the port of this container is what? 8080. The port of this container is, sorry, not 8080, it is 80. Now, it has its own IP address. This is the private IP address. Now, what I wanted to do is, I wanted to access this Nginx application outside of the host machine. For that, we should be able to access this Nginx application with the IP address of the host machine. What is the IP address of the host machine? This is the public IP address of the host machine. Now, this is the public IP address of the host machine. Now, how to access it? For that, what we have to do is we have to perform port mapping. Performing port mapping means we need to map a port on the Docker host machine to the port of the container. Okay, we have to map the port of the container with the port on the Docker host machine. And what port? It can be any port. Okay, some range will be there. It is a no range is there. So here it can be any port. Now let's try to assign this to 9090 port. We are choosing some port on the Docker host, and we are mapping that port to the container port. Now with this, what we can do is we can access this Nginx application from outside of the host by IP address of the host and the port. Okay, so with this, we will be able to access it. Now, what if we have multiple Nginx containers? In that case, not just multiple Nginx container, it can be any other container also. If we have another container, let's say Tomcat, we have Tomcat container here, or let's say this is another Nginx container. Now, for another Nginx container also, the port will be same. This is 80. Now, we can't map this Nginx container port to the same port that we have already used. It should be mapped to different port. Now, different port in the sense, now let's map it to 7070. Okay, so it should be mapped to different port. If you are trying to map to the same port which we have already mapped, it will throw error saying conflict coming, right? So this is the thing. Now let's try to perform this. How to perform port mapping? Now let's remove all the containers. How to remove all the containers which are running as well as stopped? For that, we use docker rm command to remove a single container, and if the container is running, we will use force to stop it and remove it. Then how to remove all the containers? Okay, so before that, I want to get the list of all the container IDs. For that, we have a command called docker psaq. Okay, what it does is Docker PSA stands for all the containers, whether they are in stop state or running state. Q will give the IDs of all the containers, and this is an interpolation. So we will be getting that. Now let's echo it. sorry, we need to use echo to get the output. What we got? We got the container IDs of all the containers, either they are in the running state or they are in the stop state. In our case, all the containers are in running state only. Now, to remove all these containers at once, Docker rm, and I want to use force because the containers are running. Even if it what one container is running, we need to use F to remove all of the containers, or otherwise the running container won't be removed. So Docker rmf. Now we need to use this. Okay, so it will list out all the container IDs and we are removing all of them. Now let's hit enter. With a single shot, all the containers are removed. Docker ps, Docker ps a we have to use to check both running as well as stopped containers. Got it? Now what we wanted to do is we wanted to perform port mapping. How to do that? Docker run name of the container, I'm giving it as C1. You can name the container any way you want. Now, one thing is that nginx image name has to be specified. Then how to perform this port mapping? For that, we have a option called P, which stands for port. Now here, we need to give the port of the container. What is the port of the container? 80. First, we need to give the port of the container. Then what is to which port of the Docker host we want to map it? 9090. That 9090 has to be given. I'm little confused which one to be first. This is Tomcat 70. Sorry friends, first the port of the host has to come. 9090 host port has to come first. We are mapping the port of the container to this port. What is the port of the container? 80. And what I wanted to do is I want to run the container in detached mode. Let's hit enter. Now what happened? Docker ps. If you see, the port mapping is done. Whatever the traffic that comes from the host on this port will be redirected to the container port, that is 80. Now let's try to access it. 9090. See, nginx is successfully accessed. I'm giving this to you in the chart. You can also try accessing it. Everybody in the world can able to access my nginx application on my public IP address, and the port is 9090. Now this time what I wanted to do is I want to run another nginx container, and this time I don't want to choose this port. I'm giving the freedom to Docker to choose this port. I don't want to choose it. I'm leaving the decision to Docker. Now, how to do that? For that, now let's run another container called C2. That is called automatic port mapping. What is it is called? It is called as automatic port mapping. Here we will use hyphen capital P, which stands for automatic port mapping. And when we are trying to perform automatic port mapping, we should not include the container port also. Okay, so Docker knows what is the port of the container. Now it will choose some random port on the host and it will map to that port. Okay, now let's name the container C2. We named it. We are using the same image, right? Now Docker ps. If you see, this is the nginx, this is the C1 container, where the port is 9090 that we have chosen by ourselves. Now, if you see some random port, what is this port? 32768. Okay, 32768. 32768. See, Nginx is also accessible here. Which Nginx it is? It is different Nginx. Now let's modify the content. Docker exec it c2. Okay. Now bash. Now let's go to user share nginx html. This is index.html file. Now let's modify the content of this. What is this content? Index. This is the content. I want to modify it. How to modify that? We need to use editor, but it's not there. apt update and apt install vim. We are updating the package repository and we are installing vim editor in this. Now vi index.html. Now let's name it as welcome to Docker classes. Docker classes. Got it? I just wanted to give this, save it. Okay, I saved it. I'm exiting from this container. It can be in the container, that is fine. Now refresh this page. If you see, welcome to Docker classes. If you access this IP address with this port, you will also see the same thing wherever you are in the world. That is how to interact with the container. That is how to perform the port mapping, the manual port mapping, and the automatic port mapping. For automatic port mapping, we will use hyphen capital P, right? That is clear. Now, I want to run another container with the same container name. We know that C2 container is already running. I want to run the same command again. Conflict is what we are trying to do. We are trying to launch another container with the same name. Error response from daemon conflict. The container name C2 is already in use. So we can't have two containers with the same name. That is also clear here. Now what will happen? We can't remove the image which is already attached to a container. Docker RMI engine, can we remove it? We can't, because the containers are one or the more container are using this particular Docker image. That's why we can't remove it. To remove this image, we need to remove the container first, then only we can remove this thing. Now, if you want to run Tomcat container, we can run it. The Tomcat, the container port is 8080 and the image is Tommy and -d to run the container in detached mode. We are naming that as my Tomcat and the Docker run command we know. And because 7070 port is already used, we can't use it. Are we using the 7070 port? I think not. We didn't use it, so we can use it now. See, Tomcat application is accessible over the web. Got it? So this is how to run the application in the containers. We also saw how to run Jenkins application in the container, because we have the Jenkins image in the Docker Hub. It is open source. Docker Hub is the open source. You can use the images, you can customize them. In fact, going forward, we will see that we will customize the existing Docker images for our applications. We will see that going forward. We will discuss it in the Docker file. If you have any questions till now, you can ask me. Otherwise, we can go ahead. Anything I'm forgetting here? Control PQ we have discussed. Here we are running the Tomcat server. That is fine. Now this is Jenkins server. We have already seen that. We are running the container in detached mode. For that we use -d option. Capital P for automatic port mapping. We are naming the container as app server. Chandras is asking, we can install this Ubuntu by making Windows as Docker host. Chandras, if you remember one point I made very clearly, you may be forgetting that, no worries. If you want to run Ubuntu containers, the underlying kernel should be Ubuntu. But if you install Docker in our Windows, for that we have Docker desktop. And if we want to run Ubuntu containers, we can't run it. Why? Because as I said, that Linux based containers requires Linux kernel. If you have Windows kernel, you can't run it. So to get the Linux kernel in the Windows, what you will do? We have to install Windows subsystem for Linux. So that will be used by the containers. Got it? Now let me show you that also. Docker desktop for Windows. So we need to download it. See, we also need to use WSL version or later. Okay, so then only we can run the containers in the Docker desktop. This we have seen in Docker port to get the port of it, to know the port that is reserved for Nginx. Docker port for PS, Docker port C2. See, we can see the container and the host ports with the port command. Inspect command we have seen how to run the operating system based containers. Then now let's understand one more option, that is -e. How to pass environment variable to the container or the application which is running inside the container. For that we have an option called -e. Now let's understand this command. I want to run MySQL database in the container. How to do that? For that, Docker run. What is the name of the container I want to give? We are naming the container as MyDB. And I want to run the container in detached mode. And I want to pass environment variable to the container. And if you have the knowledge of the MySQL, so this is one of the environment variable to pass the password. So MySQL root I underscore password. And what is the password that I am providing? Laxman. Now, if you see what is the image? MySQL. This is not the latest image. We are using the MySQL version 5. And here, this is not exactly the MySQL version 5. It is MySQL Docker image version 5. Okay. So this is this. Now, what is this environment variable? If you go to Docker Hub, there it will be mentioned hub.docker.com. In this, if you search for MySQL, as I said, to pull the images from the Docker Hub, you don't need to have any account with it. But to push your images to this Docker Hub, we should have account, that we will see going forward. So I'm searching for MySQL Docker images. Now, if you see, this is the Docker official image. If you click on this is the image repository. If you see the tags, See, these are the different versions. These are the different versions of the MySQL Docker images. Now, see, this is the latest one. This is the latest one. Now, out of this, we wanted to use MySQL 5. Okay. Now let's hit enter. We have the -e. We have the e option to pass environment variable to the container. Now MySQL database will be running. Now we will interact with the database. Docker exec it. What is the container name? MyDB bash. See, we are into the container shell. Now, what I want to do is I want to connect to the database. How to do that? For that, MySQL to connect to MySQL database, which is the default database that will be there. MySQL, what is the user? User is root. Where can I get it? If you go to Docker Hub, all the things will be documented. MySQL. You go here, you click on this. For every image, you can see the reference. Okay. So the container, see the environment variables, all those things, the ports and all those things will be mentioned in this document. And whatever the things that you will be using for the MySQL, the same thing will be there here also in the container world also. Now, how to connect to database? MySQL, what is the username? Username is root access denied. Using password, we need to provide password also here itself. Password is Laxman. Okay, we connected to MySQL database. Show databases. You see, these are the list of the databases. Because this is not the database class, I don't want to go into some details. Now we are exiting from the container. Control PQ I can use. Then that is how to connect it to the database. That is how to pass the environment variable to the container. Got it? Now, I want to remove all of this. Docker RMF, Docker PS, AQ, all the contents will be removed. If you want to remove all the images, Docker image pool A, which stands for all the images, it will ask for the confirmation. Just give as it will remove all the images. When you see you got all this long list, what are all these? These are all Docker image layers, which we will understand going forward. See, total reclaimed space is 1.181 GB. And one thing I wanted to tell you is the working directory for Docker is cd var lib Docker. This is the working directory for Docker. So the containers, the images that we pulled, the networks which we'll see later, volumes that we will understand later, all those things. Docker Swarm also I will tell you, friends. Docker Swarm and Kubernetes are for the same purpose, but nowadays we will be using Kubernetes only, but I will touch upon Swarm also. So this is where the Docker things will be stored. This is the working directory of the Docker. Now, let's go to next topic. What is multi-container architecture? This is important. Everything is important. Now, till now, what we have done is, before that, I want to run WordPress also, Docker run my WordPress, or you can give the WordPress itself. Then I want to run it in detached mode. I want to perform automatic port mapping. What is the image name for WordPress? WordPress itself is the image name. How do I know that? Because all these batches are using that. You don't need to have any special knowledge to know the image name. Just you need to go to Docker Hub and search for it. By default, you will be getting this. Now we are running the WordPress image, WordPress container from the WordPress image. Depending on the application, the image size will vary. What happened? Why it is exited? WordPress start. Why the name of the container is not WordPress? Yeah, we see here we need to give hyphen name. Now see why the content is created. Why content is created is this will be treated if you don't give name. Docker run just WordPress. This will be treated as the image that we want to use. Okay, some random name will be allocated, and these things will be I will tell what after the image will come. That we will understand when we understand the Docker file. Okay, so that since that time till that times please wait. Now WordPress is running 32769. 32769. See, WordPress is accessible. Now let's choose English as the language and continue here. See, welcome to WordPress. Before getting started, you will need to know the following items. What are those? Database name, database username, database password, database host. Okay, so how to get them? So that means we saw how to run MySQL database in the container. Now we are running WordPress, but they are independently running. Now our question is how to link this MySQL database to the WordPress container, because in real time no application is standalone. The application should interact with other applications. Okay, so we will be having multiple application running for the same purpose, right? You will be having databases, you will be having backend services, you will be having front-end service. There should be communication between all these containers. How to establish that communication in the Docker? For that, there are two options are there. One is link option, another one is network object. What are those? One is link option, another one is network object. Link is the legacy way of connecting the containers. It is not recommended by Docker now. We have got an advanced way of connecting the containers, that is network object. We will see these two things. Now, how to link the containers? Now, before that, what I will do is I will run the MySQL container. For time being, I'm removing these two containers. Docker RMF. See, we have another container also in the stop state. Docker RM. Yeah, we can use these containers like that. With that, the two containers will be removed. Now let's run the database container. Docker run hyphen name mydb MySQL 5. Let's run this in detached mode. Now let's pass the environment variable MySQL one root underscore password. If I'm correct, okay. So root password is Laxman. The container name is what? MyDB. And what is its IP address? Docker, Docker inspect MyDB. Inspect spelling is wrong. Inspect MyDB. This is the IP address. Now, one thing I need to tell here is in the world of containers, whether it is Docker or Kubernetes, in Kubernetes also we will be using Docker only. In the world of container world, we don't rely on the IP addresses. Why? We will be having multiple containers running the same application. Or in other words, it is right to say that we will run the same application in multiple replicas for high availability. And if multiple replicas are there, if you rely on the IP address, how to access it? Conflict comes, you will be accessing only one replica. So in the world of containers, we don't rely on the IP addresses of the containers. Instead, we should rely on the name of the container. Name of the container will act as the host name. Host name means what? Host IP, host name of the host, where you will be getting the host name. For example, this is the Ubuntu machine. This is our host. Where will be our host name? Cat etc host name. This is the host name. This is the host name of this. That's what which is reflected in the terminal. Like that, for every container will be having host name. Okay. Now that the host name is nothing but what? Container name here. Now I want to we ran the MySQL database in the container. What is the host name for the database? The host name of the host of the database MyDB. If we have the experience in databases and all, to connect to the database, we need to provide the host of the database. Host of the database is nothing but what? Address of the database. So here it is MyDB. So that means here it will be the IP address of the, sorry, this will be the host name of the database container, and here host name is what? MyDB. This we already ran. Now I want to run WordPress, but WordPress requires what? Database. Then only it will work. And what details of the database we need? Database name. Okay, if it is MySQL database, MySQL database username, root is the username in our case, database password is Laxman. What is the database host? Database host is nothing but what? The container name is the database host. What is the container name? MyDB is the container name. Now, let's try to run the WordPress. Docker run name of the container. Now let's name it as WordPress itself. Okay, WordPress, or what is the name that we have used in the documentation? That is when whatever the name it can be. That's not an issue. Now let's keep WordPress itself. You can keep your name also. WordPress. And what is the image? WordPress. I want to run this in detached mode. Let's perform, let's perform automatic port mapping. Now, one doubt you should get is when we are performing port mapping, small p, what we are doing, we are giving the host port and we are giving the container port. How do I know the container port? How do I know the WordPress container port? That doubt you should get. That you will be knowing from the documentation. That you will be knowing from the uh, going to the Docker hub, and if you press for, if you search for WordPress in the description, they will be giving the port of the WordPress. Or else, what you can do is Docker inspect, Docker image inspect. The inspect command is there for every Docker object. Docker object, I mean to say, Docker image is an object. Docker container is an object. Docker volume is an object. Docker network is an object. So these are different objects that are there in the Docker. Now, our aim is if I want to perform manual port mapping, I need to know the port of the WordPress container. Docker image inspect. What is the image name? WordPress. You see here somewhere the port will be given, but sometimes it may not be mentioned in this when they are making the Docker image. So in that case, we need to go to the description. See, exposed port is 80 for WordPress also the port is 80. Now by that I I came to know that the port of this WordPress is 80. Docker run WordPress 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 is the image, and here of course that's not going to create any issue for us, but image name should be correct. Now let's perform this in detached mode. Perform. Now let's map to the 8080 port. And what is the port of the container? 80. Now I want to link this with the MyDB. How to establish that link? What we are trying to do? We are trying to connect to the MyDB from the WordPress. For that, we need to use either link or network. Now, link is obsolete. That means that is almost deprecated. It will be deprecated soon. That's what Docker is telling. It's not recommending to use link, but you should have some idea about this if you get it in some documentation or in a project files. That's the reason I'm explaining this. Now, how to link this? For that, we have an option called link. We have link. Link with which container? MyDB container. Link with the MyDB container. Now the link will happen. That means now we can access the database from the WordPress. Now this is the earlier one, friend. This is the earlier one. Now we launched the new WordPress. Docker PS. Now what is the port? 8080. Now let's move ahead. Now let's go. What is the database name? MySQL. Where do I get it from? You will get it from the documentation, or if you have the idea about MySQL, the default database is MySQL only. Right? What is the username? Username is root. These are auto-populating because I have used it in the many times. Password is Laxman. That's what we have passed. Database host. Here it is the host name of the container, that is MyDB. Table prefix I want to keep intact. Now let's submit this. See, Sparky, you have made it through this part of the installation. WordPress can now communicate with your database. Why it was able to communicate with the database? Because we have linked it, right? If you didn't use the link, it will throw error. Let's see that scenario also. Now let's remove RMF WordPress. Okay. Now, if we access this, it won't be accessible because we have removed it, right? Now, this won't be accessible. You can see that. Now let's run the WordPress. This time, let's not link it with the MyDB. Let's go MyDB. Let's give MyDB here. Username is root. Password is Laxman. Host name is MyDB. See, error establishing a database connection. Why this error? Because the containers are not linked. To make the communication from WordPress to MyDB, the containers have to be linked, either with the link or network object. We will see more details in the next class. And one thing, friends, sorry, I won't be available. Tomorrow it's Sunday. Anyway, there won't be any class. I won't be available on Monday and Tuesday, friends, because I'm traveling to some distant place. So you need to excuse me for that. I won't be available for class on Monday and Tuesday. So please complete your payment formalities in these 2 days. And might be link may be changed on Wednesday. Okay, so I will ask them to have the same link, but they may be changing it. If you like my classes, my way of teaching and the content, if you like, please subscribe to this. And as I said, the course duration is about 45 days. uh, you will be getting about 30 to 35 hours of lectures, 35 hours of lecture for only Docker and Kubernetes. In real-time perspective, we will be installing the clusters in AWS as we have installed our EC2 instance in the AWS. We will be using Kubernetes in the AWS, all those things. And we will also learn how to install our own Kubernetes cluster in our own virtual machines also. Susma is asking what and all the software is required for practice purpose. You don't need any software. You just have to have AWS account, or else you can have Azure account also. Okay. For Kubernetes, I'm telling for the first 10 or 15 days for the Docker classes, you just have to have Ubuntu machine. Ubuntu machine, you can get it from AWS, you can Azure, or you can have your own Ubuntu machine like that.
Sir, when will you share the materials, sir? So
Ashish is asking, sir, I'm getting connection timeout while connecting to the EC2 instance from mobile system. You are getting that because you have to open the ports in the security group. Ashish, please uh, think in
Yes, sir.
that perspective. If we have it ready, we can connect.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. It is ready. Can I share the screen?
Yeah, yeah, please. You can share your screen. And Nikhil is asking, sir, is this course help for me for CK certified Kubernetes? Yes, yes. This course is very much useful for CK admin thing. Okay. So
Sir, I'm not able to share the screen right.
yeah, yeah, you will able to. Meanwhile, I'm asking, Vaikuntha Rao, can you share the notes or materials so that we can do the practice? Yes. Once you pay the money, they will be sharing you with the Google Drive. Okay. So they will be sharing the Google Drive link for the people we have paid for it. Yeah. Now is sharing a screen, Ashish. Can you go to your, have you downloaded the PEM key, the private key, and have you uploaded it here?
Yes, sir.
So go to security groups once, go to your AWS account. Your machine is in stop state, right? How it will be connected?
No, sir. Sir, I started it, but
Okay, please first start it. First start it. Click on instance state. Start instance. Okay, it will come into run state. Public IP, copy it. SSH. Yeah, people need to. Okay, go to your AWS. Click on instance ID. Now go to come down. Here you will be having security groups, thing like that. Yeah, click on security. Click on that security group ID. The inbound role, you have opened the port 22. Yeah, come down. Uh,
Can I edit it?
yeah, no. Just scroll to right. Source, okay. Edit inbound rules. Remove this rule. Okay, edit inbound rules. Remove this. So source should be here. Okay, okay. Click on that custom. Anywhere, keep anywhere. Anywhere IPv4. Yeah. Why it is showing? So it should come. Just click on that cross mark. That goes. Yeah. Uh, you should be able to put it, or else delete that rule. Click on delete. Yeah, add rule. Okay, in that, yeah, click on that. All traffic, keep all traffic for now. No, come down. You will be having some option called, yeah, click on all traffic. Yeah, on source. Now choose anywhere IPv4. Yeah, now save rules. No, don't click on it. Yeah, save rules. Now go to mobile extern, shift to capital R, accept. Okay. That's all, guys. Let's meet on Wednesday. Okay, Monday and Tuesday I won't be available for the class.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.